Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and the leakers turned me into a liar. I am so sorry. We did what I thought was the finals leak video, and then there were a couple other cards, and I did the final leak video, and then I was turned into a liar because an absolute mega leak of rares just popped open and just spewed everywhere, and we absolutely have to share these cards because they're looking utterly insane. And even though spoiler season starts proper tomorrow, there's no way I'm passing up talking about these cards because they're going to turn standard on its face. They're going to turn magic on its face. There's so much insanity coming, especially when you keep in mind the fact that rotation is about to happen with this set. Just absolutely nuts. I'm gonna shut up and we're gonna get right to it because there is a lot to cover. Before I do, please like the video. It helps me get it out to more people and helps the channel grow. I would appreciate it so much. And subscribe if you're new. Tons of crazy spoiler content is on the way, as well as some pretty crazy deck techs that I think are really great. So let's dive in. First of all, we have 0 Point Ballad. This is a sorcery for 1 black and X. You destroy all creatures with toughness X or less, and then lose X life. But if X is 6 or more, you return a creature card put into a graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. What is there to say about a card like this?
In this legendary space MMO, the heroic acts and merciless betrayals of its players weave the fabric of the universe. Who will remember you when the dust settles? Become a legend. Only in EVE Online.
Every millisecond counts. Less latency, lag, packet loss, no disconnects to more wins. Experience the future of gaming with the world's first AI-powered game optimization platform. Head to exitlag.com and download now.
Being able to essentially kill everything small as you're curving out, but yet still scale this card into the mid to late game and wipe the entire board as long as you have enough mana seems pretty good. And I'd like to point out that they've been pushing ramp pretty hard lately. There are a lot of land ramp shenanigans in standard right now, and definitely coming in this set as well. We saw the lander tokens that are going to contribute to that, so it shouldn't be too hard to keep up with scaling costs like this and wipe your opponent's board, especially if you're in a control deck where if you are devoting some of your resources to ramping, you'll probably have more mana than your opponent if they're focused on aggro or mid-range strategies. Losing the life, little bit of a bummer, but a small price to pay, especially when most of the time this is gonna hit X as 6 and bring back one of those creatures. And what's cool about that is we already have a white card that does something similar that's in standard right now, but that card you have to bring back one of your own creatures and you have to gift your opponent a card in order to do so. This, sure, you lose life, but you don't have to gift them a card, and you can just bring back one of their creatures, which means it's really good in a pure control deck where not only is it your early sweep, but if you get another one later on in the game, you can still sweep the board of all their big creatures and then steal their best creature and use it to beat them down and win the game. So everything about this card is nuts. But let me know how you feel about it in the comments. We're gonna move on. Next up, we've got the Eternity Elevator. This is a legendary artifact spacecraft for 5 colorless mana, and it doesn't turn into a creature, which is interesting. I think this is the first spacecraft that we've seen that doesn't actually turn into a creature. It still has the station ability. You can station by tapping creatures and adding however much their power is, adding that many charge counters to this, and then when it gets to 20 plus, this is going to turn on an extra ability. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. When you first drop it for 5 colorless, it's going to tap for 3 colorless right away, which means on your next turn, even if you're not ramping out anything else, on turn 6, you're going to be able to make 9-ish mana. This is good for playing all of the really expensive stuff that's available in Standard right now that you would normally have to just cheat into play. But where this card gets even crazier is when you do get to that 20 plus charge counter threshold from stationing it, it can tap to add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of charge counters on it, which is crazy. You can continue to put more and more charge counters on this card every single turn with all of your creatures and just get more and more mana out of it. I have no idea the full extent of the potential of this card. It seems kind of nuts. The best part about this card, which is the easiest part to overlook, is the fact that you can use it for 3 mana right away as soon as you play it. And that makes it way more aggressively costed. If you can play this on turn 5, but then immediately tap it to play another 3-drop, it's going to feel like it only costs 2 mana to play for something that on every subsequent turn after that is still going to give you 3 colorless mana. That's like kind of a super soul ring in a way. And then it has this 20 plus charge counter ability that is just absolutely bonkers and insane. So I'm not entirely sure the best way to use this yet. These spoilers literally just dropped and I'm seeing them for the first time along with you guys. So if you have ideas about how to abuse this, definitely let me know in the comments. I think the potential for this card is just absolutely through the roof. But we're going to move on. Next up, we've got Frenzied Baloth. And if you weren't sure if Wizards was just power creeping Standard to high hell, this should seal the deal. This is a 3/2 beast for 2 green mana. It can't be countered, it has trample, it has haste, it doesn't stop there. Creature spells you control can't be countered, and if that wasn't enough, combat damage can't be prevented. That's any combat damage at all for as long as Frenzied Baloth is on the battlefield. What more could you want in a 2-drop? This is way too pushed. Is it just me? Mono green control, or rather mono green mid-range. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Mono green mid-range is absolutely going to be a thing again, right? Mono green beats has got to be a deck in Standard after rotation. This card is just insane. This is the most crazy pushed stat line card I've ever seen in as long as I can remember. Let me know if you agree in the comments. I think this guy is absolutely bonkers. And green is absolutely going to be a contender as soon as rotation happens, because this card, it just does everything. It just does everything. They have to answer it, especially if they're in a control deck and they're running counter spells. If they don't get rid of this guy, they can never counter any of their stuff. They just got a bunch of dead cards. This card is so nuts. This set is so nuts, but let's move on. Next up, we've got Archenemy's Charm. This is the new charm, and I was hoping it would be the black charm, and I was right. This is an instant for 3 black mana, and you choose one. Either exile target creature or planeswalker, which is usually, I think, going to be the default mode for this spell. But you've got these 2 other options. Return 1 or 2 target creature and or planeswalker cards from your graveyard to your hand, or put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature you control and it gains a lifelink until end of turn. Everything about this is amazing. The fact that it's instant speed, you get instant speed exile removal for a creature or planeswalker that can pivot, and if you're up against another control deck where they don't have any creatures to get rid of, instead it's gonna bring back your creatures or your planeswalkers. The fact that this can return 2 planeswalkers from your graveyard to your hand means it could be absolutely insane in some kind of like a Super Friends deck where it's removal when you need it early. If you don't need the removal, you're bringing back your planeswalkers for an insane amount of value. But then you have this other mode on it that helps you get in for more damage, maybe gain some life against aggro decks. There's just so much versatility to this card, and I think it's kind of nuts. The fact that it's instant speed is huge and probably the most important part of the card. And that means even though this is 3 mana for removal, which it will usually be removal, rather than having other cards in your deck that are just 2 mana to remove something, I think the versatility and the instant speed does make up for that. I think this card is absolutely crazy. Next up, we've got Synthesizer Lab Ship, a 4/4 artifact spacecraft with the station ability for just 1 blue mana. And at 2+ charge counters, that means you can station this with just literally a 2-power creature to turn this on. At the beginning of combat on your turn, up to one other target artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 2/2 and gains flying until end of turn. So every turn, one of your artifacts turns into a 2/2 flyer as soon as this is crewed for 2 power just once. That means you got some random 2/2 dude sitting there on the ground that can't get through because it doesn't have evasion. Just use it to station this instead, and now every turn you've got something that can swing in with evasion, which is nuts. But then if you keep charging this up and it gets to 9+, it becomes that 4/4 flying vigilance creature itself. Honestly, kind of insane for just 1 mana. Getting that value in the early game off just 2 charge counters is what really makes this thing super playable, because you don't have to wait until you have 9 for this thing to be useful, but it just gets even better and gives you even more value at 9 and still only ever cost you 1 mana. It's also an artifact, so it's going to want to be in decks where, you know, you have a lot of artifacts, go wide artifacts, where you get more value for having more artifacts. So I do think there's a lot of versatility in this card. I think it's super cool, and I have no idea how I would build around it. So if you guys have ideas about what to combo this with, what cards to use it with, what kind of deck to build around it, definitely let me know in the comments. I think this is another great card, but we're going to move on. Next up, we've got Sunset Saboteur. This is the one card I did read before I started going live with this video. This is a 4/1 human rogue with menace for just 1 black and 1, and it has ward discard a card. This is the craziest aggressive 2-drop that mono black has got in as long as I can remember, and of course it has a downside because of that. This last line of text: whenever this creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and opponent controls. So the more you swing with this dude, the more value you build up on your opponent's side of the board by making their worst creature a little bit better. And I'm still concerned with the best way to utilize this. Part of me thinks that maybe you use instant speed removal like cut down, you swing in with this, target the creature to get the counter, and then before the ability resolves, kill it with the cut down so that they actually don't get the counter and they have 1 less blocker, so that the menace can kick in and you can get through for your 4 damage. And then if they want to get rid of this and stop all of that insane tempo that you're getting, they're going to have to discard an extra card when they use their removal spell. I think there are some really interesting playlines you can do with this, but outside of instant speed interaction, I'm not sure the best way to deal with this downside. So I'm super curious if you guys have ideas about the best way to make this card work and to sort of prevent that +1/+1 counter downside outside of just using instant speed removal to kill the thing in response, which is a very viable tactic and probably will be the most common one used with this card. But I'm still curious to hear what your thoughts are. So if you have ideas about how best to abuse this, definitely let me know. I know I'm telling you guys to comment on every card here, but all of these cards are looking insane, so it actually makes sense. I would really love to hear you guys' comments on this. Next up, we've got Pain for All. This is an enchantment aura for 1 red and 2, and it enchants a creature you control. When it enters, the enchanted creature deals damage equal to its power to any other target, and whenever enchanted creature is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to each opponent. So this is kind of a fling that costs 1 more mana than a fling, except the thing that you fling doesn't die. It stays on the battlefield and keeps this enchantment on it, and then it turns into like a Capra or a what's the other card? Oh, what is that guy? I forgot the name again. I just asked you guys to tell me the name of the 3-drop red card in the last video that when it was dealt damage, it deals the same amount of damage to whatever, and now I forgot it again because I'm absolutely out of my mind right now. I'm sorry guys, I've been filming videos all day and I'm like losing my mind. But this enchantment essentially turns any creature into that, while also being a fling that you don't lose your creature when you play. it seems kind of crazy. Like, you can use the damage mode to kill something if you need to. You can just do damage straight to your opponent's head, and then you've got this thing that whenever it takes damage is going to deal even more damage. This card has to be broken, right? Maybe not broken, but there is definitely a deck out there that's going to push this thing to its limits and do absolutely gross things with it. I am 100% sure something like that's going to exist. I don't know exactly what it looks like yet, so if you have ideas, definitely let me know. But this card's nuts, man. All of these cards are so nuts. What the hell is going on in this set? But let's move on. Next up, we've got Sir Vondam, Sunstar Exemplar, a 2/2 legendary human knight with vigilance and menace for 2 mana in the colors of Orzhov. It's already pretty good for a 2-drop. Well, maybe not by today's power creep standards, but it should be. And then it has 2 more lines of text. The first being, whenever another creature you control dies or is put into exile, you put a +1/+1 counter on Sir Vondam, and you gain a life. Like, the counter wasn't enough, you gain a life too? Sure. And then the other line of text, when Sir Vondam dies or is put into exile while its power is 4 or greater, you destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. All you have to do is have its power get to 4, and this thing becomes a piece of removal that can destroy anything. If you're in a sacrifice deck, you can sacrifice your own stuff to buff up your Sir Vondam. In fact, it's not limited to once a turn. You could sacrifice 2 things in the same turn.
Hey, I'm 45 now and honestly thinking of retiring in India someday, but I have no idea how to plan financially. Girl, you need to hear this. Around 70 to 80% NRIs want to retire in India, but most of them are doing financial planning while working abroad. तो जब इंडिया वापस आना ही है, तो प्लान भी इंडिया का ही होना चाहिए, right? True. What's your retirement game plan then? I just started investing in Axis Max Life Market Link pension plan with Nifty.
To like a Bartholomew or something like that. Get this guy up to a 4/4, gain 2 life, and then if you really need to, you could sacrifice the Sir Vondam as well and just destroy any one non-land permanent. The versatility of this card is crazy. This just does everything. It's insane aggro, insane pressure on your opponent when it comes down, just as a win condition that's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's good against other aggro decks because you're gaining a little bit of life in subtle ways as you go so that you can win the race. The menace makes it hard for them to block it. The vigilance makes it hard for them to swing back into it. This is kind of the perfect answer for Orzhov to deal with other aggro decks, especially red-based aggro decks, which seems great. But the fact that it can just be removal for any non-land permanent a little bit later in the game is also kind of bananas. It does everything that you want, and this card will absolutely see play. There may even be a new archetype in Standard around this card. I know I have a Mardu Humans deck that I am absolutely in love with, that I think is in a very prime position for the new Standard, and this guy seems like he'll probably be an auto-include. He's just nuts, but we're going to move on. Next up, we've got Diadrene Synthesis Amalgam. This card is looking a lot like a Hydroid Crassus. Do you guys remember that card? I'm getting those vibes from this. This is another one that I managed to read before I went live recording for this video. This is a 0/1 legendary artifact creature construct with trample for 2 mana plus X in the colors of Selesnya. So 1 white, 1 green, and X. It enters with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the amount of mana spent to cast it. That's not equal to the amount you put into X, but the total amount of mana you spent to cast it, which means even if X is 0, this thing still comes in with 2 counters and is a 2/3 trampler for 2, which is honestly pretty good even if you're not going to utilize the X. Also, whenever you attack, you may remove a counter from each of 2 creatures you control, and if you do, you draw a card and make a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. This just gets absolutely crazy in counters matters decks. If you're going wide with tons of counters, not only can you just remove 1 from the Diadrene, so you only need 1 other creature to have counters on it to trigger that ability, but yeah, you also get a 2/2 colorless robot to replace the 2/2 power and toughness you're removing in counters, but also draw a card. And if you're just making a bunch of counters every turn anyway, it's just pure value. You just get to keep drawing, which is just awesome. This card is so crazy. It's going to draw you a card pretty much every turn in the right deck. I can't wait to brew this in some kind of a crazy Abzan deck with Genova, because Genova is going to spit counters everywhere. You're going to be able to utilize those counters with this. Just, I don't know, man. My mind is going crazy. But this feels kind of similar to Hydroid Krasis for me. It just, you can buff it into high hell if you get this later on in the game. It scales, it can come down as a huge threat, but it's always going to have this ability to be able to swing in and use this ability. And what's cool is you don't have to attack with Diadrine itself. You attack with anything at all. Just one crappy creature, one of the 2/2 colorless robots if you want, and you can still remove a counter from each of up to 2 creatures, draw a card, and make a 2/2. Just a lot of value in this card, and I think it's going to go a long way in Standard for sure. Let me know how you feel about it in the comments. Next up, we've got Zoo Ifit, Osteoharmonist. Harmonist? Osteoharmonist. A 2/3 legendary human wizard for 3 mana, 2 black and 1. You can tap it to return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a skeleton in addition to its other types and has no abilities. Activate only as a sorcery. So, pretty interesting card here. You can literally bring back anything just by tapping this, and it's only a 3-drop. So this can bring something out on turn 4, which is kind of at parity with some of the best reanimator spells we have access to in Standard, such as Zombify. But it gets even crazier because you could exile this with Soul Cauldron and give all of your creatures with counters the ability to use this and bring back all your other creatures, which is kind of cool. What I like about this is the fact that it makes you really think outside the box as far as wanting to use creatures that have the best power and toughness possible, regardless of abilities. Because when you bring the thing back with this, the abilities go bye-bye. Right? But they do count as skeletons, so maybe we make some sort of deck where we're using all the skeleton cards, Corpses of the Lost, Case of the Stashed Skeleton, all that stuff, to go crazy with Skeleton Tribal, but we're also playing some of the really high power vanilla creatures that we can run with Zoo Ifit here. That could be a way to use this, but I think the best way to use this, if you haven't realized yet, is in a Flicker deck. And I've talked a few different times in these leak spoiler videos about how good I think Flicker decks are going to be in the new Standard. And this is just another example. You bring back an Atraxa or an Atali or whatever with this card, and then you flicker that thing and you get the real version. You get all of the abilities, which is just awesome to me.
Why did you cancel your Midjourney subscription?
I found this hidden AI that does everything I want for a one-time cost. I'll show you.
Let's say you want to create a coloring book. All you do is type your idea, like, I want a coloring book of cute.
So I'm really excited to brew with this. I think there's a lot of different ways you can use it. Like I said, you can use it in a deck with like vanilla stuff. I believe we got a few cards. What set was that we got vanilla support? There was the dude that could search for vanillas and put them into your hand. There were a couple cards that cared about creatures without abilities. I forget what set those came in though. If you guys remember, let me know in the comments. But there is sort of an ability to synergize with those kinds of cards. There's just a lot of different ways to use this, I feel. And I can't wait to brew with it. So if you want to see a very specific build, me going a certain direction with this card, definitely let me know. This is one I'm excited to brew with. But next up, we've got Starwinder, a 7/7 Leviathan for 2 blue and 5, which is a lot, but it also warps for 2 blue and 2. And if you warp it, it's going to come into play as the 7/7, but then at the end of turn, it gets exiled, and then can later be played from exile for the full 7 mana cost. What makes this cool is that whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw that many cards. So if you know you're going to get through with some creatures for combat damage, you warp this in for 4, swing in, hit with your other creatures, draw a bunch of cards, and then it gets exiled, and it's just free value that you can use later. Even if most of the time you're never going to get to 7 mana to use this thing, to hardcast it, it's still kind of free value. It feels a lot like adventure creatures in a way. It's It's like a mix between Evoke and Adventure creatures. You get some value off it initially, and then you have some extra value just sitting in exile waiting for a rainy day. If you get to the point where you have enough mana and you don't have anything better to do, you can always replay it from exile, and it just gives you a little bit of extra gas, which is really cool. But another thing I want to point out that I realized recently about these warp creatures, as well as one of the other big mechanics in this set, the station mechanic, is the warp creatures work really well with the station cards, because you can get more bang for your buck, get more value out of the warp creatures sticking around on your turn until end of turn. If you have a really powerful spacecraft out that needs to be stationed and you warp something in, sure, the creature can't attack that turn unless it has haste. Most of the warp creatures won't, but you can still get extra value. Not only are you getting any ETB abilities or leaves the battlefield abilities from your warped creature that turn, but it's still staying in play until the end of your turn. So you can use it to station your stuff and get extra value out of it that normally you wouldn't be able to get any value out of that power or toughness, right? It wouldn't be able to swing. It wouldn't be able to stick around and block on your opponent's turn because it gets warp. Interestingly enough, can kind of go hand in hand with station, with your spacecrafts, and sort of work together to be even more efficient, which I think is super interesting. And I have to applaud whoever sort of designed around that, came up with that concept in design, because the fact that two of the major mechanics in this set complement each other so well, but also can be used completely separate from each other without really too much of a downside. There's just a lot of versatility in that, and I think it's really interesting design space. So hats off, not actually off because I'm keeping my hat on, but yeah. Whoever came up with that, whoever decided to build these mechanics around each other in this way, that's awesome. Good on you. We're going to move on. Next up, we've got Elegy Acolyte, a 4/4 human cleric with lifelink for 2 black and 2, which seems understated for today's standard with just how pushed everything is, how crazy the power creep is, but it's got a couple of abilities here. First of all, whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card and lose a life. Now, this isn't for each creature, this is one or more, so you're only going to draw 1 card a turn and lose 1 life. That's not necessarily the worst thing ever though, because sometimes, if you don't get a choice, having to draw too many cards and lose too much life could be a downside. Just getting to draw 1 extra card every turn, kind of like a free Phyrexian Arena, as long as you're hitting in for damage, is definitely very much welcome on your 4/4 lifelink for 4. But the other ability, the Void ability, is where things get really interesting. At the beginning of your end step, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped this turn, you create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. You don't need to spend any extra mana or anything. Something needs to leave the battlefield, or a spell needs to be warped. And the cool part about that that's easy to overlook is the fact that it doesn't have to be one of your things leaving the battlefield, and it doesn't have to be one of your spells that's warped. So anybody's non-land permanent that leaves the battlefield on your turn will trigger this Void and give you a 2/2. Also, anybody warping anything, I think you can warp at instant speed, but who knows, there could be some, is also going to trigger this and give you a 2/2, and I think that makes the ability to consistently trigger the Void abilities that much easier to pull off. So I think consistently this will be a creature factory. I think almost every turn this will basically read 4/4 lifelink for 4, draw a card, lose a life every turn, make a 2/2 every turn, which for 4 mana is super good. And even if you only get to trigger it once before they untap and use their sorcery speed removal to take this out, you still spent 4 mana to get rid of a piece of removal, get a 2/2, and draw a card, which is probably pretty fine. So the more I think about this card, the more I like it. I think a lot of people are probably going to underestimate it at first because, again, 4/4 lifelink for 4 mana just does not keep up with the power creep that we're experiencing in today's standard MTG. But I think when you actually see this card in action, it's going to work pretty well and a lot better than most people will think at first glance. So really cool one. I'm definitely going to want to explore building around it. It's also worth noting it's a human and a cleric, so it could fit into two very relevant tribal decks, especially humans, man. My Mardu humans deck is so good, so I'll probably at least try this out. But let's move on. Next up, we've got Sledge Class Siege Ship. This is a 4/5 artifact spacecraft with station for 1 green and 2. And when it gets to 7+ counters, it becomes a flying 4/5 that has, whenever the spacecraft attacks, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Oh god. Oh god. This is gonna get... This is either really good or just not good enough. And I really can't make up my mind. I'm gonna need to sit with this card for a little bit and mull it over before I decide which way to think about it. Because you could just cheat a creature into play that you then use to station this to then attack and cheat another creature into play. This could be something that snowballs your cheating creatures into even more insane value that your opponent can't come back from, which could be really crazy. Man, I don't even know. It could just be a little much, you know? The one thing to keep in mind is you don't have to use a big 7 power creature to station this thing, right? You could just station it with a couple small dudes over the course of a couple turns and still get there and then get your huge guy into play. And also, it's worth noting that until you get to those 7+ counters and turn on the ability, it's not a creature. So your opponent's not going to be able to get rid of this with creature removal. You can keep it safe at like 5 or 6 counters, right? Until you're ready to do the thing, and then you could still just station it, turn it into a thing, swing it in the air, get through for 4 with evasion, get your biggest creature out onto the battlefield, and even if they kill it after that point, it already did its job. Actually, your opponent will probably have a very difficult decision to make about killing the big, giant, nasty you just put out for free, or killing this. So, I do think it's really easy to underestimate the spacecraft, because of some of the subtle ways in which they're good that are just easy to overlook. Like dodging creature removal before you're ready to use it. I think that's a huge part of this card that most people won't realize at first, is it just sits there safe until it's good and ready to do its thing. And even if you're just stationing this with a couple of small things over the course of a couple turns, you're probably still going to swing in at a point in the game where you're still cheating out a big creature way earlier than you should have, even if you're kind of taking your time a little bit. So I think there's a lot of good with this card. And then when you take into account the fact that it's an artifact that costs 3 and will trigger a simulacrum synthesizer, then you start to really think that it could have a chance. Like I said at the beginning, I don't know for sure. This is either going to be super busted or just not quite good enough, a little too slow, and it's really hard to know which direction it's going to go. But I will say this, regardless of the outcome, I do think it's going to be underestimated at first and a little bit slept on, because some of the nuance of what makes this card good is just so easy to overlook. But we're going to move on. Next up, we've got Coral of the Void. This is an enchantment aura that enchants a creature you control for 1 black and 3. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, target creature card from defending player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking. Already kinda good. You want to wait until a creature is ready to attack to slam this on and then immediately swing. I do worry that you lose this and get blown out to instant speed removal, so it's a little bit scary. But let's see what the other ability is. Void, at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice this aura unless a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn or a spell was warped this turn. So it seems like we have confirmation here that Void is always an ability that gives you something if a non-land permanent leaves or a spell is warped. What it gives you is always different. Sometimes it's cost reduction, sometimes it's special abilities, whatever. So the Void ability is actually a downside here, right? You have to keep feeding Coral of the Void to keep it going. You have to keep making something leave the battlefield or warping something if you don't want to lose this, which is kind of interesting. What's also worth noting is even though this grabs something out of the graveyard, and makes it automatically tapped and attacking. Most things we've seen in the past that do that make the thing get sacrificed at end of turn. This doesn't. As long as you fulfill the void requirements, you get to keep the aura itself, and no matter what, you get to keep the creature. So even if they untap and destroy the creature that you put your Coral of the Void on, whatever creature you grabbed from your opponent's graveyard, you get to keep. And it got to swing in for a bunch of damage and potentially get a tempo advantage on your opponent because of that. So there is a lot of value in this card. It's scary, high risk, high reward. You have to wait until your opponent's tapped out or play around their removal. But even if you lose it to sorcery speed removal after they untap, I still think you get enough value off of this for it to be worth it. And if you get to keep the creature that this is on and keep this on it, then that's probably just going to win the game most of the time. If they can't get rid of this within one turn cycle, you're just going to overwhelm them with value, and it's going to be pretty nuts. But very scary card, high risk, high reward, and I'm super curious to see if it actually ends up being good enough in Standard. Let me know your thoughts in the comments for sure. But next up, we've got Secluded Starforge. This is a rare colorless land. Taps for 1 colorless mana. You can pay 2 mana and tap it to tap X untapped artifacts you control. Sorry, let me rephrase. Pay 2 mana, tap it, and tap X of your untapped artifacts you control. Target creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Interesting. So if you go super wide with artifacts that are like not really using anything that taps them, that are just sort of there, you can use them with Secluded Starforge and just get a big buff on a dude each turn if you want. But you can also just pay 5 mana and tap this to create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. And this one isn't tapped when you create it, so it's immediately available as a chump blocker or to trade with their small creature or whatever the case may be. This land does a lot, and this is even more proof that they are pushing in the direction of a colorless deck being viable in Standard. As soon as they dropped Ugin, the way the new Ugin is worded and everything, I predicted that every set we're going to get more and more support for an all colorless deck being in Standard, and I think we're seeing even more of a push in that direction. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I would be very, very surprised that within the next, if within the next couple sets we didn't get there. And this card could absolutely be a contender in that deck. It works decently well with the new Ultima Origin of, was it Origin of Chaos? Origin of Devastation? I don't remember. The 5-drop Ultimate card that came in the Final Fantasy set makes it so that all of your lands that tap for colorless mana will tap for 2 colorless mana. So in a deck where you are all colorless and you're using Ultima and all of your lands are really cool lands like this that tap for colorless and have all these extra added benefits, abilities, you can make a whole bunch of extra mana with Ultima, which seems really, really cool. Just a lot that this does, honestly. It makes 2/2s, it buffs your dudes. Another thing that's worth pointing out is if you're making a 2/2 every turn with this, eventually you got a bunch of 2/2s. They're also artifacts. So you could tap all those 2/2s to contribute to that X to buff one of your creatures if that creature has, trample or flying or whatever, and can just get through for the win by doing that. So there's a lot that this card is actually doing. Be really interesting to see if it ends up being good enough. I'm really not sure. The jury's kind of out. It's got a lot of potential, but how many decks can afford to run how many colorless lands right now? Really not sure. So we'll have to wait and see. But let's move on. Next up, we've got Entropic Battlecruiser, a 3/10 artifact spacecraft with station for 1 black and 3. And if it gets to just 1 or more charge counters, 1+, whenever an opponent discards a card, they lose 3 life. So this could be part of the backbone of a brand new discard deck where it literally only needs to be stationed once by literally anything unless it has 0 power, to turn on this ability. It's not a creature yet, right? But every single time they discard, they're going to lose 3 life. Kind of interesting. On top of that, if you get to 8+ charge counters, it becomes a 3/10 with flying and death touch, which is already kind of nuts, and also gains the ability whenever this spacecraft attacks, each opponent discards a card, each opponent who can't loses 3 life. So no matter what, when you swing, they're losing 3 life, whether they discard a card or not. If they have a card, they have to discard a card, and they still lose 3 life. And it's a 3/10 flying death touch, which means there's almost nothing they can block with to trade with this, and anything they do block with is going to die to it, and if they don't block it, they take another 3 damage. So that's at least 6 damage they're taking after that. It seems kind of crazy, man. Honestly, all of these crazy artifact decks are going to be bananas. Simulacrum Synthesizer players are so happy right now. And I don't know if there's some kind of a hybrid deck where you can use Synthesizer and discard and Entropic Battlecruiser or not, but there is so much potential for building in so many different directions with all of these new artifacts and spacecraft, and I'm really excited to see what people do with it and how deep they go and what kind of new archetypes spring up in Standard. There's just so much potential for just craziness with these new cards. And I do think people are underestimating the spacecraft just a little bit, because it seems like they take a hell of a lot of an investment and they're kind of slow, which on the one hand I'm kind of happy about, because I'd like to see mid-range really return to form and be a contender in Standard. At the same time, I think people are looking at that and underestimating these cards, because there are a lot of ways to get value off these cards that are being overlooked, like how we mentioned the warp mechanic working so well with these station cards. So I'm just super excited to see where all of this is going. Spoiler season starts officially tomorrow, so we're gonna see a lot more. I hope you guys will join me for my video tomorrow. It's gonna be pretty wild breaking down the first official spoilers, especially after knowing everything they've showed us, or they haven't shown us, everything we've gotten to see from these leaked cards so far. But we're gonna move on. Next up, we've got Extinguisher Battleship, a 10/10 artifact spacecraft with station for 8 colorless mana. This is another big push towards a colorless deck being a real thing. When it enters, you destroy target non-creature permanent, and then this spacecraft deals 4 damage to each creature. That's absolutely nuts, man. This is like the Death Star. Like, you literally destroy anything and then deal 4 damage to every creature. It is a sweeper that doesn't hit the biggest creatures and destroy any non-creature permanent in the same card. Sure, 8 mana is a lot, but there's ways to cheat stuff into play. There's ways to get cost reduction. Ramp is looking crazier than it's ever been in Standard right now. There are going to be so many ways to get this thing out. I am not worried about the 8, but it even gets better because it is a spacecraft. You station it, it only needs to get to 5+ counters and it becomes a 10/10 flying trample. That's better than it just being a 10/10 flying trample right off the cuff, because it's immune to creature removal. Gets rid of their best non-creature permanent, wipes the board of everything with 4 or less toughness, and then at the drop of a hat becomes a 10/10 flying trample to swing in for the win. And you don't have to do it right away. You wait until you're ready to swing in for the win before you turn it into a creature. That way it's immune to creature removal. 5 charge counters is so little at the point in which you'll be getting an 8-drop into play. So it's kind of an upside in a way because of that, and I love it. Not only that, but because it's so small, you could station this with something little, and then maybe use like proliferate cards to just get to the rest of the counters and get to 5. That's a little bit less realistic with some of the high station cost cards, but with this being only 5+, this could absolutely take advantage of some proliferate cards and get even crazier. So this card just kind of does everything. I can't wait to brew around it. I feel like a broken record. I'm saying that about every card, but this thing is nuts. All we need to do is find the best way to ramp it out. Maybe the new Super Soul Ring that we saw at the beginning of the video would pair super well with a card like this, right? That would line up. You could play that on turn 5 or maybe turn 4 off a Llanowar Elf, and then literally play this the very next turn and do your thing. And then what's cool too is you can just drop a creature that's gonna have summoning sickness the next turn, won't be able to attack anyway, use it to station this thing and swing in for 10. Dude, this set's crazy. I have no idea what these decks are gonna look like after rotation when this set comes into Standard, but Standard's gonna be wild, man. It's gonna be absolutely crazy. But let's move on to the very last card, and the one card that I am super upset about. I saw this right before I started filming. There was like 3 or 4 cards that I actually had time to read through, and this one just made me want to tear my hair out of my head. Beyond the Quiet. A sorcery for 2 white and 3. Exile all creatures and spacecraft.